I've been hunting whitetail in northern Wisconsin for the better part of a decade. I'm 32 now, and I'd consider myself somewhere between intermediate and advanced when it comes to woodsmanship. I know how to read sign, I understand deer behavior, and I'm comfortable spending days alone in the wilderness. This happened during the November 2022 gun season. I lease 40 acres of private land about an hour west of Green Bay. It's mixed hardwood forest with a couple of oak ridges and a marshy bottom that deer use as a travel corridor. I'd been running trail cameras on the property since August, checking them every 2 weeks to pattern the bucks moving through. I arrived at the property on a Wednesday afternoon to hang one more camera before opening weekend. The plan was simple: hike in about a half mile to a pinch point I'd identified between 2 ridges, mount the camera, and hike back out before dark. I had my stealth cam, fresh batteries, a formatted SD card, and my side-by-side to get me to the trailhead. The walk-in was quiet. Mid-November in Wisconsin means most of the leaves are down, so you can see pretty far into the woods. I found the tree I wanted, a big white oak with a clear view of the deer trail, and strapped the camera about 6 feet up. I set it to take photos on a 30-second delay with no flash. I wanted to avoid spooking any deer that might be using the trail during daylight. As I was finishing up, I noticed something carved into a tree about 15 yards away. It looked fresh. Someone had used a knife to cut what looked like a tally mark system into the bark. 5 vertical lines with a diagonal slash through them, then another set of 5, then another. I counted them, 37 marks total. I didn't recognize the tree from any of my previous trips, but I also hadn't been focusing on that particular area. I figured maybe the previous landowner had marked something years ago, lumber inventory or property boundaries or something. I took a photo of it with my phone and headed back to my vehicle. That night at home, I couldn't stop thinking about those marks. They looked too fresh. The exposed wood was still light-colored, almost white. If they'd been there for years, they would have darkened or filled with moss. I pulled up my trail camera photos from the previous weeks and started scrolling through. That's when I saw it. In a photo dated 5 days earlier, there was a person standing in front of my camera. Not a hunter, not someone in camo, just a person in dark clothes, hood up, face completely obscured by shadow, even though it was a daytime photo. They were standing perfectly still, looking directly at the camera. The timestamp said 2:47 p.m. I checked the next photo. 30 seconds later, same person, same position, but closer. Maybe 3 feet closer. Next photo. Closer again. This continued for 16 photos. Each one showed the person advancing toward the camera in 30-second intervals, never changing posture, never looking away. In the final photo, they were close enough that the frame only captured their torso. Their hand was reaching up toward the lens, then nothing. The next photo was a doe walking through 3 hours later. I immediately called the sheriff's department. I gave them the SD card, showed them the photos on my computer, told them about the carvings. The deputy who came out was polite, but basically told me there wasn't much they could do. No crime had been committed. Trespassing requires proof of intent and posted land, which I had, but without identifying the person, they couldn't press charges. He suggested I post signs and maybe install more cameras. I went back to the property 2 days later with my brother-in-law. We were both armed. We hiked to the tree where I'd mounted the camera, and when we got there, the camera was gone. Not broken, not damaged, just gone. The strap was still there, buckled around the tree, but the camera unit had been removed and taken. The carvings on the nearby tree had been added to. Now there were 43 marks. We left immediately. I didn't say anything to my brother-in-law about the number increase because I wanted to see if he noticed. He did. On the hike out, he asked me how many marks I'd seen the first time. When I told him 37, he stopped walking and just looked at me. There were 43 today, he said. I know. We haven't been back. I still have the lease, but I'm letting it expire this year. I tried to find the SD card the deputy took, but when I called the department, they said they had no record of it. The deputy who responded to my call transferred to a different county a month later. I still have the photo I took of the tree on my phone. Sometimes I zoom in on it, trying to see if there's anything else I missed. Last week, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background of the photo, barely visible through the trees, there's a shape. It might be a stump, it might be shadow, but it's person-shaped, and it's watching me take the picture.
I'm 27, and I grew up hunting elk in Colorado with my dad and my uncle. We go to the same unit every year, same general area west of Steamboat Springs. The terrain out there is brutal. Steep mountains, thick timber, elevation that'll kick your ass if you're not prepared. But the bulls are worth it. This was September 2023, early archery season. My dad couldn't make the trip because of a work thing, so it was just me and my uncle. We packed into a spot we'd hunted before, about 5 miles from the nearest forest road. We had a wall tent, a wood stove, all our food and gear loaded on 2-pack horses. The first 3 days were slow. We were hearing bulls bugle at night, but they were staying high, up in the dark timber where it's almost impossible to get a clear shot with a bow. On the 4th morning, my uncle connected on a raghorn bull about a mile from camp. It was a good, clean kill, double lung. The elk went maybe 40 yards and dropped. We field dressed it right there, packed the meat into game bags and started the process of hauling it back to camp in relays. It took us the rest of the day. By the time we got the last load back to camp and hung everything in the shade, it was almost dark. My uncle stayed at camp to start processing the meat while I hiked back to the kill site to clean up. We're big on leave no trace ethics, so I wanted to bury the gut pile and scatter the area so it didn't look like a slaughter zone. I brought a small folding shovel and a headlamp. When I got there, the gut pile was gone. I'm not talking about scattered by scavengers. I mean completely gone. We'd left the heart, lungs, stomach, intestines, probably 60 pounds of offal, in a pile next to the tree where we'd hung the quarters. Now there was nothing. No blood, no drag marks, no sign that anything had been there at all. The ground where we'd left the pile was smooth, almost like it had been swept. I stood there trying to make sense of it. Bears will sometimes take gut piles, but they make a mess. Coyotes, ravens, they scatter things. This was clean. Too clean. I started looking around with my headlamp, thinking maybe we'd gutted the elk in a slightly different spot and I was misremembering. That's when I found the arrangement. About 20 feet away, someone had built a structure out of elk bones. The ribs were stuck into the ground in a circle, points facing inward. In the centre was the skull, placed upside down. Around the perimeter, the vertebrae were laid out in a spiral pattern. I'm not a superstitious person, but I know what a shrine looks like, or a warning. I got on my radio and called my uncle, told him what I'd found. He told me to get back to camp immediately and we'd deal with it in the morning. I didn't argue. The hike back to camp was a nightmare. My headlamp was decent, but the trail was rocky and uneven, and I kept hearing things moving in the brush around me. At one point, I stopped and turned off my light just to listen. In the silence, I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Bipedal, measured. Following the same trail I was on, maybe 30 or 40 yards behind me. I turned my light back on and yelled, "I'm armed!" Which was a lie. I'd left my bow at camp and only had a knife on my belt. The footsteps stopped. I started moving again, faster now, almost jogging. Every time I paused to catch my breath, I'd hear the footsteps resume behind me. When I finally reached camp, my uncle had the wood stove going and a fire outside. He took one look at my face and asked what happened. I told him everything. He didn't question it. He just nodded and said we were packing out first thing in the morning. We took shifts that night, one of us awake, one asleep. Around 2 a.m. during my uncle's shift, he woke me up and put his hand over my mouth before I could speak. He pointed outside the tent. Someone was walking around our camp. Slow, deliberate circles. We could hear the footsteps crunching in the pine needles, the occasional snap of a twig. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to be quiet. My uncle had his .44 Magnum revolver in his hand. We sat there in the dark, listening for maybe 20 minutes. The footsteps never stopped. They just kept circling. Eventually, my uncle chambered around loudly enough for whoever was outside to hear it. He didn't say anything. He just let the sound do the talking. The footsteps stopped immediately. Then we heard running. Fast, crashing through the underbrush, heading downhill away from camp. We packed out at first light. Didn't even break down the tent properly. We just loaded the horses with the meat and our essential gear and got the hell out of there. When we got back to the trailhead and loaded the truck, my uncle opened his pack to grab something and found a piece of paper tucked into the top pouch. Neither of us had put it there. It was a hand-drawn map of our campsite, detailed, accurate. Our tent was marked with an X. We reported it to the Forest Service. They sent a ranger out to investigate, but by the time anyone got there, our camp had been destroyed. Tent shredded, gear scattered. They said it looked like a bear, but I know what a bear does to a camp. This wasn't that. I haven't been back to that unit. My uncle sold his horses the next spring. We don't talk about what happened, but I know he thinks about it. So do I. I'm a 38-year-old software engineer from Seattle, but I grew up in rural Idaho and I've been hunting mule deer since I was a teenager. I'm methodical about it. I scout hard. I use OnX maps. I research land ownership and access points obsessively. I like knowing exactly where I am and where I'm going. In October 2021, I drew a tag for a wilderness unit in central Idaho. It's a unit with low draw odds and a reputation for producing big mule deer if you're willing to work for them. I planned a 10-day solo backpack hunt, entirely off-trail, into an area that looked promising on satellite imagery. I flew into Boise, rented a truck, and drove 6 hours to the trailhead. I started hiking in on a Saturday morning with everything I needed on my back: tent, sleeping bag, food, rifle, optics, the works. My pack weighed about 65 pounds. The first 5 days were incredible. I saw deer every day, including a couple of bucks that were close to what I was looking for. I was camped near a spring in a high basin, glassing from ridges during the day, staying mobile. It was exactly the kind of hunt I'd hoped for. On the 6th day, I decided to explore a drainage I hadn't checked yet. It was steep, rocky, full of mahogany brush and juniper. According to my maps, there was no trail, no old roads, nothing. Just wilderness. About halfway down the drainage, I found a hatch. It was set into the ground, flush with the dirt, made of heavy steel. It was maybe 3 feet square with a recessed handle, and what looked like a locking mechanism. The metal was rusted but not ancient. It had weathered, but it wasn't from the 1950s or anything, maybe 20 or 30 years old. There were no structures nearby, no roads, no old cabins or mining equipment. Just this hatch, in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest access point. I pulled out my phone and checked my position. I was on BLM land, public property. Whatever this was, it wasn't supposed to be here, or at least it wasn't marked on any map I had. I tried the handle. It was locked. I should have left it alone. I know that now. But I was curious, and I figured maybe it was some kind of old government installation, a weather station or a seismic monitoring site. I've heard about those being scattered around remote areas. I spent maybe 10 minutes looking around the area, checking for any other signs of human activity. I found a cairn about 50 yards away, a stack of rocks that looked deliberately placed, then another cairn, same distance, same direction. They formed a line pointing back up the drainage toward the ridge I'd come from. I followed the cairns. There were 6 of them, evenly spaced, leading to a flat area that overlooked the hatch. Someone had cleared the brush here recently. I could see cut branches, disturbed soil, and I could see boot prints, fresh ones, maybe a day old, maybe less. That's when I heard the radio. It was faint, crackling with static, but it was definitely a radio. Voices, garbled but human. It was coming from the hatch. I got low and moved back toward the hatch quietly. The sound was definitely coming from below ground. I crouched next to it and listened. The voices were speaking English, but I couldn't make out the words. There were at least 2 people, maybe more. The transmission would cut in and out, and every time it came back it sounded closer, like whoever was down there was moving toward the hatch. I didn't wait to find out. I stood up and started hiking back the way I'd come, moving quickly, not quite running. I didn't look back. I'd gone maybe a quarter mile when I heard the hatch open. I'm sure of it. It was a metallic clang, echoing up the drainage, unmistakable. I stopped and turned around. From where I was, I couldn't see the hatch itself, but I could see the ridgeline above it. There were 3 people standing there. They were too far away to make out details, but they were looking in my direction. I started running. I didn't stop until I got back to my camp. I packed everything up in under 10 minutes and started hiking out. It was 3 p.m. and I had about 8 miles to cover before I reached my truck. I made it by nightfall. When I got to the trailhead, there was another vehicle parked there, a white Suburban with government plates. 2 men in casual clothes were sitting inside. When I walked past, one of them got out and asked if I'd had a good hunt. I said yes. He asked if I'd seen anything unusual. I lied and said no. He smiled and told me to drive safe. I reported it to the BLM office when I got back to Boise. They said they'd look into it. I never heard back. I checked satellite imagery of the area when I got home. The hatch isn't visible, the cairns aren't visible, but the flat area where I saw the boot prints shows up as a dark patch, like the ground has been disturbed. I'm not going back, and if you ever find a hatch in the middle of nowhere, my advice is simple: keep walking.